समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
There was a massive show of military might by China today as Xi Jinping rode in a limo inspecting China's new weapons and thousands of troops with Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un by his side, both pariahs in the West. This military might and the show of strength came just days after that big meeting in China, the power huddle between Modi, Putin, and Xi Jinping. All of this must be understood in the backdrop of Trump's tariff war against India, a war that even at home, there were those, including those who support Trump politically or are in the Republican camp, who warned Trump that he was making a big mistake. In a moment from now, we'll be talking to a top US analyst who co-authored a piece with Nikki Haley warning and urging Trump not to go ahead with his alienation of India. They argued that this would only lead to the rise of China. Is that moment already upon Trump? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we continue to look at the geopolitical ramifications of Trump's tariff war. The images out of China sent their own message to Donald Trump. Trump must have thought a thing or two as he saw the power huddle between Modi, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin. This after Trump's own efforts to bring home a deal on Russia and Ukraine from the Alaska summit failed. Many believe that these images, Modi and Putin taking a car ride, are asserting India's strategic autonomy. India's foreign minister today made it clear that India's path lies ahead in a multipolar world where India will continue to assert her sovereign rights as a nation. Remember, Trump has claimed he's punishing India for the purchase of Russian oil. This even as China, that buys more oil from Russia than India, has remained unscathed. There are many other instances of American hypocrisy as well on this entire issue of Russian oil. But in the meantime, these images on your screen, the might of China, for in particular the West to observe. Pakistan's Asim Munir, only among the few contentious figures in attendance. Putin and Kim Jong-un, among others, even the Iranian leadership present at this parade. This is exactly what had been anticipated by some. Nikki Haley and Bill Drexel co-authored a piece in Newsweek saying that it might be a strategic disaster if Trump continued on this path. And is that disaster now upon him? Let me introduce our guest today. Bill is with us. He co-authored that piece with Nikki Haley. They're both at the Hudson Institute. That piece in a Newsweek did talk about a possible strategic disaster, how India and the partnership with India was necessary to take on China. In fact, both Nikki and Bill called it a no-brainer to remain invested in that partnership. But some might say, Bill, that ship has sailed. When you look at the images out of China, let's start with the military parade. Those in attendance today are effectively pariahs in America. There's a big statement Xi Jinping is making to the West with this military parade. What did you think as you saw those images?
Well, I think military parades, even grand ones, are not unusual for the People's Republic of China. They're definitely, they've been gearing up potentially for direct military action in Taiwan for years. So yes, it's definitely a major showing. It's not totally new, but it does, people like me in Washington, D.C. Going, so to speak.
Yeah. And military parades, okay, you can still rationalize this is not unusual for China. But when I would turn your attention to the images out of the SCO summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as it's known, you saw a virtual power huddle between Prime Minister Modi, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, interlinking of hands between Modi and Putin, that car ride, the three of them sharing a chuckle or two. No idea what they were really talking about, but it was more the sort of symbolism of this moment that made its own statement. This is what you and Nikki Haley in your op-ed were warning would happen. And here it is happening.
Yeah, the optics were very telling, were very strong, sent a very clear message that I think is exactly the message that India is wanting to send right now. The challenge is we haven't really been seeing a lot of deals, a lot of, statements about military cooperation or further economic integration of real substance that might not have already otherwise been the case. And as a result, it's hard to separate theater from substance overall with this sort of set of developments. I think, yes, India is trying to assert its strategic autonomy, but it's unclear, has the ship really sailed? My sense is that with this administration is famous for taking big swings in different directions, pulling 180s very suddenly and very unexpectedly. In some sense, theater is the goal of a lot of this administration's policies. And so to me, the jury's still out about where this is going to land.
That's fair, because I think India does have its own caution when it comes to China, and India at least will proceed very carefully because of China's support, not least because of China's support to Pakistan in the recent military conflict between India and Pakistan. But before we look ahead, I want to look back. I want to take you back to the op-ed that you co-wrote with Nikki Haley in Newsweek. And there are a couple of things you argued in this piece. You made the point that it was a no-brainer for the India-US partnership to be a countervailing force, I'm summarizing here, to the rise of China, that the containment policy vis-a-vis China lay in a deep, abiding relationship with India. You also spoke about a potential strategic disaster that could be at the American doorstep if India was alienated. I know you're saying that the door may not have been fully shut on Indo-US relations, but has a lot of what you were fearing when you and Nikki Haley wrote this op-ed, have you seen a lot of it play out in recent weeks?
Yes, well, I think, this op-ed and op-eds like it, I had been planning to write really since midsummer. And the issue was every week it got worse and worse and worse. And we continue to be on the wrong trajectory. So that concerns me a lot. There's no question. Even before the tariffs, you could argue that we were in one of the roughest patches we'd been in many years, perhaps still decades. Things like the Trump going after Apple for investing in India. Things like, obviously, the claims of brokering a ceasefire after Operation Sindoor, and the H-1B issue, which is still ongoing. We had been seeing this summer a lot of friction even before we escalated all the way to 50% tariffs. So to me, really since Operation Sindoor, we've been in a troubling path that hasn't changed yet.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened in the immediate aftermath of Operation Sindoor. You actually had Donald Trump announce, before India could make its own announcement, the halt in hostilities between India and Pakistan, apportioning then a role for himself that India has challenged. And then going on and on and on and on till Indians stopped counting how many times Trump would make the same point about not getting credit. A whole bunch of people I've spoken to, including those who've actually worked in Trump's first administration, believe that this battle, this anger with India is not so much about trade. Trade just is probably one part of it, but that this is really personal pique, that Trump has been flattered by Pakistan, who has spoken about his how he should get a Nobel, and he's been basically offended by India's refusal to say thank you, President Trump, in public. Is that how you see it?
I think there are two major factors here, and that's one of them. So I think at some level, one of the elements at play here is a sense of personal affront about credit and how the whole post-Operation Sindoor thing went down. But I think it's very hard to weigh how that relates to trade, because I think even if we had taken that out of the equation and none of, Pahalgam, Operation Sindoor had never happened, suppose, President Trump's perhaps his top policy agenda so far internationally has been a reset of global trade. And it is true that India has been historically a very protectionist country. And so you could have predicted before Pahalgam, before all of this, you could have predicted that there was going to be some friction on that point, because that's, one of his top priorities. How those two weigh up against one another, I think, is unclear. The fact that they are both kind of hitting at the same time in conjunction, I think, makes it more difficult to address either fully, which is a problem. But I think they're both major parts of the issue. If you ask me, if we could rewind, how would this have gone better? My sense is that after Pahalgam, the Quad should have come out very strong in support of India, commensurate with the amount of support that China gave to Pakistan. We missed that opportunity. Equally, I think a lot would have changed if if Prime Minister Modi or his diplomats adopted some of the language that Prime Minister Vajpayee used and thanked President Trump for facilitating talks. That would have been palatable, I think, on both sides. But that opportunity was also missed, and now we're in a bit of a fix.
It would be my submission, Bill, that had President Trump not preempted India in making an announcement on the halt in hostilities, or what he called a ceasefire, perhaps it would have been much easier for the Indian leadership to say, well, thank you, President Trump. I know your people in your administration picked up phones and, you made Pakistan see sense. So however India would have chosen to position it. But it is actually, and on both scores, both on trade and on Operation Sindoor, I think what a lot of people in America aren't understanding is that for India, this is a slight to sovereignty. An American president making the announcement about an India-Pakistan conflict, an American president wagging his fingers at India and saying, you can buy oil from here, but not from here. In both cases, the common point is it's an affront to sovereignty.
Well, so I agree with you, certainly, that by diplomatic protocol, if not just general kind of goodwill, it would have been preferable to wait for India to have its own statement first. This administration is not into diplomatic protocol, so it's hard to... that's the sort of thing that I agree with in terms of what would have made things go better. I'm not sure that that's going to change. But I think you've hit on something that we hit on the piece, which is that my fear is that there's no one at the highest levels of the US government right now with the ear of Trump who has a really intuitive sense of how India sees things. And that's a major systemic problem. And it gets to a really big problem, which is that in Washington, D.C., there is no greater imbalance between the importance of a country and the expertise in the United States watching it than with the case of India. India, in my estimation, is at least as important to American interests as Israel, but gets a fraction of the attention in civil society and in the bureaucracy. And that's something we can and need to change, particularly in the bureaucracy. And we could do that. So that's what I've been advocating here in DC.
That's a big statement. If India is as important with the US as Israel, what explains that even though there are people, for example, of Indian origin, people from the Indian American community or links to the community that hold high posts in the Trump administration, J.D. Vance is married to somebody with roots in India. What explains this absence of expertise, absence of intuitive understanding, absence of basically understanding what Indians across governments, by the way, are particularly sensitive about?
One is that, the Indian American community has been tremendously successful. By some estimates, it's the wealthiest minority in the United States, but it's a very new group. It's only in the last 25 years that the lion's share of Indian Americans have arrived. And the upshot of that is that there has not been that level of institution building, either for the Indian American community internally or for the Indian American relationship as it relates to Indian Americans. India-American relationship, that is. The result is that, when you compare that to the infrastructure of organizations and PACs and everything that exists for Israel, there's a major imbalance. So part of what needs to happen here is that Indian Americans need to mobilize and start building those institutions that really create these pipelines for talent. I think the second thing that goes on here is we have a little bit of an optical illusion, because there's no doubt. I mean, we have a tremendous number of Indian Americans in the United States. It's the largest Asian minority group of single heritage, and India is the largest source of students for American universities currently. It's eclipsed China in that. So we have this sense, oh yeah, we know India. They're right down we have Indian Americans right down the street, but it's not exactly correct, because there's quite a big difference between these kind of immigrant communities, people-to-people ties, and deep political understanding. And I think that goes both ways. I think that so many Indians have studied in America, gone back to India, feel they know the United States, but the way that the U.S. government works, the way that the Indian government works, is much different. And that's the infrastructure that's been missing. If you look at the statistics on the number of American students who study Hindi, it's incredible. It's incredible. Third most spoken language in the world, and we have fewer people studying it than Korean, for example. So I think that we just haven't caught up to the fact that even if we have a lot of diasporic connection, our political understanding can still simultaneously be at a low level, and we need to fix that.
So, you and Nikki Haley had the piece that you did, but what about others like Peter Navarro? What about others like Stephen Miller? In fact, we have a question on this from one of our viewers who says, Barkha, it's well known that Trump is not some policy wonk. This is Prasad. All problems he creates are rooted in his ultra-right-wing inner circle. Peter Navarro, Stephen Miller, etc. Navarro in particular has become some sort of like household name in India because he makes such absurd, like his probably most absurd statement was to call Russia's invasion of Ukraine Modi's war. I mean, and like every day it's like one insult after the other. He's called India a laundromat for the Kremlin, while Trump himself has laid out the red carpet for Putin in Alaska. Is there a division of opinion within the base, the Republican base, on how to handle this? And does it frankly not matter because Trump is such a top-down driven administration?
Yeah, I think both of your characterizations are pretty apt. Trump rules in a way by faction. He likes to have a lot of conflicting opinions within his administrations, and those opinions are much less coordinated in terms of how policy is enacted than in other administrations you might be used to seeing. So in a sense, it's a little entrepreneurial, right? It seems like Trump has a lot of deputies who all feel empowered to kind of set their own policy and make their own statements, sometimes in conflicting directions. But I think, we come up then very quickly against the problem of a very loud minority, right? If you ask most India watchers, including on the right in Washington, we would all agree that the U.S.-India relationship is still essential, right? It's just the fact that you do have a lot of these different voices. It is similar, frankly, to the debate we're having right now about Indian Americans culturally and so on. On Twitter, you get a lot of really ridiculous anti-Indian sentiment. But again, I'm seeing that photo now. It's outrageous. It's but it's not representative. It's a loud vocal minority, but it's not clear how much of MAGA world this really makes up, let alone the Republican Party writ large.
Yeah. Here's my question, though. You say India is as important to the US as Israel. Most people, whether on the right or on the left, there is a kind of bipartisan, there has been at least a kind of bipartisan investment in the India relationship. And I would say it's the same here. It's the Modi government now, it's been the Congress government earlier. What explains the departure in Trump's policy on Pakistan from Trump's first tenure to now? And it might not even be something as lofty as a departure in policy, but certainly, the lunch with Asim Munir, expecting Modi to drop by for lunch or a visit on the same day, the fact that there's now a suggestion from former NSA Jake Sullivan that Trump has thrown away ties with India because of business dealings his family has with Pakistan's crypto council. And if India was there in China, well, so was Shehbaz Sharif, so was Asim Munir. So, I mean, how is Trump squaring these contradictions with Pakistan?
It's a little bit of a mystery to many of us here. I think there could be a number of factors. I will say this, if you rewound just 6 months, one of the big jokes I would often tell is that I hope Pakistan is as good a partner to China as it was to us. That joke no longer lands because we've evidently been trying to warm up these ties. I think one thing is that it's characteristic of this administration to want to learn the lessons that have often become already kind of learned in the strategic community itself. So we saw President Trump come into this administration with a lot of ambitions for Russia that proved difficult to realize. And we've seen him kind of sour more and more and more on Putin. But he wanted to try. Similarly, I suspect, Pakistan's great at talking a big game and then under-delivering. So I suspect what we're seeing now is that this administration, wants to try with Pakistan. I'm sure that the Nobel business, they seem to have learned how to flatter this administration very effectively. And that is an important diplomatic skill that they've mastered. I don't expect it to stick. And as I say, Pakistan routinely under-delivers. It's a bad partner to have. We've seen that with them harboring Osama bin Laden and how long that took to kind of get that figured out. And ultimately, they're owned by China. So there's not really long-term much in it for the United States, but perhaps there's a learning curve that just has to run its course. And I believe it will.
Pakistan being owned by China takes me to my last question. China and America. Now, one of the big mysteries for India is if this is really about Russian oil, then why has China not been penalized? Now, China obviously has choke points vis-a-vis the United States, like the supply of rare earth minerals and so on. But there's also some sense that Trump doesn't want to compete with China. Trump eventually wants to cut a deal with China, and that's why Trump is being quite muted with China. And maybe that's why he's no longer seeing the value in the way that you or Nikki Haley or others have seen in India, because he wants America and China to be on the same side. Do you see that?
So I think there have been two theories about what's going on here vis-a-vis China. One is that he wants a big, beautiful deal with China, and that comes at India's expense. The other is that this is actually just a sequencing issue. So this administration wants to work out a few essential issues before it takes on China head on. And the idea there is that there are areas where China could have leverage, where China could play countries off one another against the US as the US tries to kind of tackle China. My sense, and particularly if you look at President Trump's post from yesterday, is that it's a sequencing issue. I think the main event, what he sees as the main event of his second term in terms of foreign policy, is a coming trade war with China. And what we've been seeing now is largely prelude. It's a very dramatic, very unexpected, intense prelude, but it's prelude. And what's coming, in a sense, is much larger.
So you think that Trump still sees a trade war coming with China, in which case it would make even more sense for him to have better ties with India, one would imagine.
I would imagine that too. I think that there's a level of underestimation of India, perhaps in this administration. Like I say, it's always difficult to separate theater from substance as well. I think there's a lot of posturing and a lot of they're trying to turn up the pressure. But as I say, they like to do big dramatic shifts back and forth. I mean, we forget that just in January, this same year, there was a really optimistic sense that this was going to be an even better administration for India than Trump 1 was. So, like I say, I think it's true that he's really putting on maximum pressure rhetorically and in terms of tariffs on India right now. I'm not sure that that will continue. And at some point, again, this goes back to the learning curve and this administration wanting to figure things out itself. At some point, it will emerge that to really tackle China, India is indispensable.
Yeah, to tackle China, India is indispensable. But what will be interesting to watch is how India's own relationship with China evolves in the meantime. I want to just ask you quickly, Bill, you said it's not clear what happened at the SCO, where will it all land? It's not clear whether this is the final word on India-US relations. What might it take to fix this? Because it seems that it's kind of gone to a level where both leaders have a problem. The New York Times doubling down on a German newspaper reporting that Modi was reluctant to take a phone call with Trump because he wasn't sure how it would play out in the public domain, how Trump would actually handle that call or what was said by both leaders. So what does it take to fix this, if at all?
I think it's going to be very complicated. My sense is that a lot of this administration's policy is driven at the top. And so the best way to really patch up a lot of these issues, be it Russian oil, be it trade generally, be it foreign investment in India, or be it H-1Bs, is for President Trump and Prime Minister Modi to speak directly. I realize that's a very difficult proposition politically. But if I were an America watcher in India or an India watcher in America, my highest priority would be trying to find ways to get the two leaders to talk that's politically palatable to both. Now, I think that's the best chance for the two nations to resolve this internally. I also think there are external factors that could also help to resolve this. China is famously bad at handling India long term. It's always a mystery why it alienates India when it does. And there's really a laundry list of issues between China and India that could explode at any point. Galwan is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There are territorial issues across the border, including an entire state the size of Austria, which China promulgated new Chinese names for. That's Arunachal Pradesh just earlier this year. The Dalai Lama could pass. We don't know when that will happen, but when it does, we know that's going to be a massive explosion point for the two countries. And then, let alone that Pakistan is so deeply intertwined with China at this point that it's impossible to imagine friction there not bleeding into friction with China. And that's something that amazes me, is that, the Indian military has claimed that China had provided active military intelligence support to Pakistan during open hostilities recently. And simultaneously, we have this huddle in the SCO that's being shown now. That's remarkable in a sense as well. So I think China could certainly mess this up and help inadvertently help the United States and India to reconcile. But as I say, the best thing is for the leaders at the top of both countries to find a way to talk directly and work this out.
I do have some skepticism about China for all the reasons that you just mentioned. But I do believe that, Trump's foreign policy has been so transactional and so volatile and so unpredictable that this is a tactical counter move by India, not necessarily a strategic one. But, tactics turn to strategy if given enough time. And so this relationship needs to find a way to repair itself. And at the moment, that impasse, it's not clear how it's going to be broken. Bill Drexel there, who co-authored a piece with Nikki Haley. Bill is at the Hudson Institute, making a big statement. India is as important to the US as Israel, but perhaps nobody at the top of the Trump administration is getting India and where India is coming from at this moment. As they say, we'll watch the space. Thank you so much, Bill. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.